Welcome to attempt 4 of trying to film the Glyphwriter. I've been finding lots of bugs and having to stop and re-go. So I'm just going to reset all of these to factory standards for now, because it's still on since the last time. I'm going to keep this set to 3 though. Alright. So, this is your basic Glyphwriter. It does not come with any of these paths. These are all paths I've added to it for testing and for bug testing. So this needs at least one path added to it, and it should give you a configuration warning up here. Let me show you what that looks like. A configuration warning up here if you do not have a path child. Not only a path child, that path needs to have a path follow. So let's add a path right now and go through the process of making that. So, and I'm going to immediately add a path follower to this, and let's just make an O. So let's name the path follow O, because it's actually the name of the path follow that determines what letter is written to this sign here when the path is actually completed. So the easiest way to make it is to go, in this case I have this facing the Z direction, so I may as well just go into the Z direction, and then just click your points here. This is a lot less painful than trying to guess where those points should go. So I'm not gonna even try to make a good O here, but let's just make an effort. So what I'm doing here is just holding down shift while I'm clicking on these, and this is allowing me to set the control points, which is what allows me to make smooth curves with points. So this is a very wonky O. It's going to do. So we've made our first letter. Where does it start, by the way? It starts from up here, so I'm going to need to go around. Around? Yes, because this is 0.4, so I'm going to need to go counterclockwise in making this path. I'll address that later. So I'm going to turn on tutorial paths so you can see what that looks like. But along with all the paths I have here being drawn, that's what tutorial path does, you're also going to see 3 copies of it in scale paths. So let's start. So the first thing you might notice is these are not on the scene. That's a known problem. I'll show you what happened, but you will see that all these things are in fact here. You'll see the sign isn't visible. These are. I clicked them to be on. There's no block following me. So let's just go with that. Let's do that for now. Let's now fix our path. So now let's come out of that mode, and we'll see that that O actually rendered on the outside of this thing here, which I think is the activation area for the Glyphwriter. Even if it wasn't on the activation area and there was something else that it clipped onto, it still wouldn't be convenient for us. I've tried. That's what place paths on surface here means. So it won't work if I try it right now. It did work when I tried it right now. Fantastic. Usually I have to reload the scene before that works. So you might notice that button immediately unclicked itself. That's because it actually runs a method in the Glyphwriter that will take any paths attached to it and pop all those points to the surface. So if I pull one of these points out right now, let's just pull it out nice and straight in the Y thing. So now, this would be a very wonky O to try to write, especially because there's no surface for me to raycast against. But if I run place paths on surface, it pops back in. Its Z is set to 0 with respect to the surface. So I've shown you the tutorial path. Tutorial auto writer will be a little square that follows the first path, in this case Bish. It will follow that first path over and over and over with a speed equal to 1000 divided by 1 3D units. Sorry, 1000 divided by 1000 3D units. So it'll move 1 3D unit per second. The visible follower gives you a little block that shows you that A, the raycasting is working, and B, exactly where you're raycasting. Your cursor kind of does the same thing. This is a bit more visible. I like it for debugging. Sign visible makes this sign visible. It can be very frustrating to try and input something without knowing whether what you've input has worked. The answer is what this sign actually takes as an answer. Whenever this sign is displaying the same thing that's on here, then it's going to solve the panel that's in here. It does require a solve panel. Without the solve panel, the Glyphwriter will crash, so don't leave this as null. The solve panel in this case is this one right here, which is just the answer is magic. I'm going to make the text nothing. Scale paths, the more you have of these, the more copies of each path you're going to make. Be careful with that. If you have a lot of paths and you set this to a high number, you're not going to get much benefit out of it, and you're also going to cause a lot of lag, as it then has to process all of those paths throughout the path history. Start letter anywhere allows me to, right now I have to start the O from up here and go all the way around. Start letter anywhere, I could start it from anywhere. That gives me enough room to draw the O. And with the scale paths, the O could be much smaller, so I could, make it potentially anywhere on here. Visibility bug label is the last important thing I want to show you, and then I'll talk about tolerances and how to set them. So as soon as I get in here, the first thing you'll notice, besides maybe the moving cube that's very distracting in the background, is all the text in the top left corner. That is the distance between the first 2 points when I set the unit offset to basically look at the first 2 points that are rendered up on those paths there. That is what we want to look at for our tolerances. So the tolerance determines, I need to talk about how the algorithm works right now. So the path is broken up into a number of points. Whenever I'm raycasting on that sheet, on that surface, I'll be storing a path history. When the path history gets large enough that it could conceivably start solving those paths, then it'll start comparing the path history to the different points along those paths, and it's going to do for that for all of the paths simultaneously. So if I have a raycasted point that is, in this case my tolerance is 1, so if it's 1 away from the next point in Bish, then it's going to update my Bish progress counter by 1. And since my Bish points are 0.2031, it is entirely possible that I will in fact solve the first 5 Bish points as soon as I start writing, because my tolerances are 1, and so that'll be, the Bish points will still be in range up to the 5th one. The smallest one here appears to be 0.064, so let's round that to 0.065. So the smallest one and the largest ones here are the ones that you're particularly concerned about when you are thinking about what to set your tolerances to, or whether you need to change what you're doing. Oh, my largest one is actually 0.235, which is the Bosch path. So the paths will be of different distances, which is what causes the differences in the distance between points, because it's breaking all the paths down to the same number of points, but the paths are different distances. Very easy to understand there. Now, what's going to cause me some problems here, and what's going to cause delete to accidentally happen a lot, as well as B looking at that, and murder is going to be another one, is that I have tolerance of 1. I'm going to be solving 10 points of those at a time, and I'm going to be able to accept a lot of variants of those. So this is how the debug label is how you decide what your tolerances should be, and I'm going to say it should be roughly not more than 10 times your smallest, and you're aiming for around 5 times the median. So in this case, we'd be looking at somewhere around 0.65, I think, would create the most consistent results. But you can feel free to experiment with that. Now, as soon as I start raycasting, you're going to notice it's going to the current number of points that are in the path history. Once I get to 50, it's going to, let's see if I can do it a different way. Yes, now it's keeping this because it's keeping enough points. So now you can see my progress along each path. Right now, my high points of progress are along the smallest A and the smallest murder. So I haven't made anything like a murder, which is just the swoopy M you might be able to pick out there. But it's 84, while the A I was actually drawing is 49. If I complete this, I did actually get a murder. A B and a murder, in fact. So those are the two I was saying would be done too quickly. So let's point out the largest murder here. It's this swoopy M shape. And I think, well, I didn't actually succeed there. This can be tricky sometimes, which is why it's so frustrating with that. And I accidentally deleted everything. So this should be making a murder. There we go. Finally made a murder. Hey, it's a me. Now let's just make a deletion. There we go. Made a delete. And I'll just show you the CBA real quick if I can. C, B, and you'll notice that I'm just starting from anywhere, and I'm succeeding. And I accidentally got the murder, so I'll have to make a larger A to overcome the confusion with the murder symbol, with the M. So, because the tolerances are the same no matter what size of path you're looking at, there we go, we got CBA. And this path lit up telling us that we just cast some magic. So, That's the debug label. This debug label will be visible. Sorry. For every Glyphwriter you have, there is going to be a debug label. So if you have it visible on all of them, you're going to get a mess of text up in the top left corner. So I would only have it on when you're trying to determine what each glyph wall should be. If your glyph walls all have the same letters, then you'll really only need to modify the first one. So that should be decent. Now, a start letter anywhere can be finicky, and it might not work for some of your magic sigils ideas because you can just start them from anywhere. That's why I made it a toggle. Otherwise, you have to start where the beginning of the path is defined. Now, I said earlier that I would tell you how to get around the part where I have to start at the same part of the O every time I make it. And the way you get around that is by making multiple paths that represent an O. So you might make one for each side here, each side. So you can start at your bottom and make it, or you can start here and make it. So that's 4, and then you might make another 4 to represent the other directions. It's not a great solution, but that's how limited the Glyphwriter is. It was really only made to make magical symbols, not really letters. That's a big part of why I recommend keeping the sign here so players know what they're doing. I didn't explain the delete symbol, but I did mention it earlier. So this sign will never delete itself. It'll just keep adding text and adding text and adding text. It doesn't have a length definer, and it doesn't delete itself when you stop raycasting. I decided that would be very, very annoying, so I didn't do that. Instead, I implemented a symbol that will reset it. So in my magic system, I imagine this as saying, always start with this symbol. And then that symbol just happens to be the delete symbol, not actually a writing symbol. That's the easy way to do it. It doesn't make that much sense, I will admit, when you're writing the alphabet. But you do need a delete symbol in order to clear the sign, so that once you put in a wrong input, you can still back up somehow and put in the right input to that. And that's how to use the current version of Glyphwriter.